So, getting right along with City Summit, have the opportunity now to start introducing part of our crew, Rocker Labs. And a lot of you guys may know about Rocker Labs, and I always have people that ask me all the time, what exactly does Rocker Labs do? And I was like, besides always have great food and amazing parties, they build a lot of cool companies and they invest in a lot of cool companies, but I've seen sometimes people don't really understand exactly how that works, and so we wanted to put together a platform, of course, as we call it, get in where you fit in. And you know, you have a good idea, you have a direction, and we have a lot of people that get into situations where they don't know whether they want to be in an accelerator, an incubator, a co-work space. Now they call them like these hypersonic accelerators that are like weekend things. So it's so many different things, but we wanted to kind of explain all of this stuff and kind of have a conversation. But I think maybe we could just start off. Professor Petrukin. Yes.
Doctor, I'm a Juris Doctorate, so you can refer to me as Dr. Petrukin
wow.
as well.
Got all kind of talent on this stage today. I need to go get some real letters behind my name. This is not working out for me. I'm a fake dean today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, but also a little bit about your role and what you guys are actually doing at Rocker Labs?
Absolutely. So I'm originally from Moscow. I went to school in the States. And I think that when it comes to entrepreneurship, I've really sat on both sides of the table. I started off as an entrepreneur my senior year in college. I was part of 3 different companies. I always say I saw the three different sides of being an entrepreneur. My first company was almost like a walking zombie. The second company I joined was acquired by Skype. And then the third one, we grew from about a team of 30 people to about 250. And now it's, I think, over 500 right now in New York. So 3 very different models of a success story, all out of the New York ecosystem. And then eventually I moved over to being an investor. I joined a VC fund. I opened up their New York office. I also worked in Latin America. So from all of these different perspectives, I was able to see how different ecosystems interact with entrepreneurs and what kind of elements are necessary for them to be successful. When I moved here to Miami, to be honest, I didn't actually even know that there was a tech scene. I thought it was a great tax haven. The weather was wonderful, and you know, New York at that time of year was a little too cold to go back to. But after even being here about 3-4 weeks, I discovered Rocker Labs. And I was really floored by what they were doing, because I think that from both an investor perspective and an entrepreneur perspective, I see that a lot of people are trying to do this on their own. And one of the things I think about the Miami ecosystem that's so strong is it's very collaborative. And that's really at the core of what Rocker Labs does. They help entrepreneurs build their companies. We're really here to empower entrepreneurs to co-build together with us, provide our subject matter expertise, which is to be able to build a startup from scratch and to be able to scale it successfully, while they can focus on their core competency, which is whatever subject matter they chose to be able to solve a problem in their specific area. At Rocker Labs, I'm the Director of Investor Relations. It means that on a day-to-day basis, I work with all of our portfolio companies. We have over 30 portfolio companies right now in various stages of being launched. And I also work with our investors. So we've created a strategy called the Co-Invest Strategy, where we work with VCs, angel investors, private family offices all over the country and all over the world to ensure that if they're interested in finding interesting pre-seed and early stage companies, we're here to be able to introduce them to the entrepreneurs that are part of Rocker Labs.
You know, the moment you think you know somebody, you get them in a session like this and they start talking and you're like, damn. And, you know, I just knew you as the cool blonde girl at Rocker. You're always so nice, but that's astounding. So why don't you, since you've been on both sides, one of the things, before we even get to the actual questions in the books and for the course material, a lot of people always say, you know, what is my space? You know, some people want to be in a co-work space and then they get there and they realize they're introverts, so co-work spaces don't work out as well for them. Then you have things like accelerators, but people need to be nurtured a little bit longer, so it's an incubator. So when you think about that entry point, how did you best advise? Because I've seen a lot of companies come to Rocker that just weren't ready to be associated with Rocker at that point. How would you advise entrepreneurs the steps or what entry points they should take to decide where they should go, whether it should be an accelerator, incubator, or a co-work space? How would you best advise that?
Well, I think that first and foremost, you should take a look at what industry you're trying to build a company in, figure out what the industry norms are, because certain industries have stronger presences, whether it's accelerators or co-working spaces, and then also honestly assess your own working style. For me, I know when I was building my company, I'm very much an extrovert. I love to chat with everyone. So I realized early on that probably working in a co-working space wouldn't have been the right fit for me, because it would be very difficult for me to structure my day and actually be productive, because I'd spend the entire time talking to other people about their ideas and really not focusing on my core product. Other people, for instance, if you're maybe not as familiar with the ecosystem and you're using this opportunity to really plug yourself in and get the pulse of what's happening, a co-working space might be a great opportunity where you're not sure what your idea is, you like to be around smart people, and it's a way for you to be able to learn what's happening in your space and what kind of opportunities there are for you to be able to enter them. I think accelerators and incubators, that's a whole, I think that's very much a separate question from a co-working space, in the sense that you need to examine where your company is and what kind of true value you can get from one of those programs. At the end of the day, a lot of them do require for you to give up equity, and that's a pro-con pro argument you need to have in your head, in the sense that what can you really accomplish in such a short time frame? Building a company is not an overnight success. For every Instagram, for every Facebook, for every Google, these people had been working for years at a product or at an idea. So when you go into an accelerator and incubator, you really need to be able to think strategically. What do you want out of that experience? Because you're actually giving something up in return. Right. And that's whether it's networking context, whether it's to find a CTO, but be sure that you have in your mind a clear goal and make sure that that goal can be accomplished in 3 to 4 months. Otherwise, it's really a wasted opportunity, and you may be better served waiting a few months or a year or so and then going back into one of those programs.
So like, when I think about Rocker Labs as a co-create, because everybody can see, okay, I want to go work with Rocker Labs, it's a co-create space, but we always talk about the benefits, but we never talk about the missed opportunities. So I wanted you to kind of address, what do you think are some of the things most people don't take advantage of when working with an organization? Well, although Rocker Labs is very unique to its format, especially in South Florida, what do you think are some of the biggest things people don't actually take advantage of when working with an organization like yours?
So I think that one of Rocker Labs' biggest strengths is our sheer size. We have over 100 employees, and we have a global presence. We have offices in New York, London, Toronto, Miami, and Colombia. So when an entrepreneur often comes that's maybe South Florida based, I really always encourage them to be able to think on a more global scale. Rocker Labs, we're not necessarily an accelerator or an incubator, we're true partners. We co-build together, and that's not just a buzzword that we use. At the very essence of what we do is we not only invest money into a company, but we also take equity in that company. And what that really means is our interests become aligned. So if an entrepreneur needs to launch something in order to have a very important investor meeting at the end of the week, our interests are aligned to make sure that that launch happens successfully, and they can go before an investor, and that company increases in value. So one of the things that I always tell our entrepreneurs is, even if you're based locally here in Miami, take advantage of the Rocker network, take advantage of all the partners, of all the investors that we've developed through our own personal context. And if you see someone that you're interested in meeting in London, or if you really want to get into the Latin American market, we have a presence in those places. So the world is so interconnected that you shouldn't be limiting yourself to where you physically are, and you should look at a wider horizon.
That's a very good perspective, because I've seen, although sometimes having a niche market or focusing on a particular region isn't a bad thing, but I do believe that's probably one of the biggest things that's overlooked at Rocker, are like Y Combinators and people that are spread across the world. You shouldn't come in with a limited vision when you have this huge opportunity. It just makes no sense as an investment wise, because your investors want the most bang for their buck.
And markets these days are very global in general. There's no such thing as I'm building for a US market or I'm building for the Latin American market. Something that's typically can be successful in the US is most likely a global product that will be applicable to a lot of different users. So, there's a way to think about, I'm going to be launching in maybe one market first, but at the end of the day, when we're co-building companies, we really look for exponentiality. That's one of the things that I, as an investor, and as part of the investor relations group, looks at when we're evaluating whether or not we want a company to join our portfolio. And what exponentiality really means is, it's not based on the boundaries of where a company is based or where the founders are from. It's whether or not that company has certain factors in place that can make it scale exponentially and on a global basis. We see the best ideas coming out of India, out of Hong Kong, et cetera, but those products we're using on our phones today here in Miami. So being able to really think on a wider scale is like advantageous for entrepreneurs overall in general.
I got you. And I think when I hear that, and we were having a conversation last night, a lot of people seem to have a limited scope and they don't take the time to actually understand the full market. So guys, I definitely want to open this up to a Q&A, but if you had to just give key elements, because I've had the question asked today, I've had the question asked plenty of times. We're gonna do it a little bit differently with you. So basically the hashtag. I'm gonna ask you a question and give me a hashtag of how you would describe each. So it can't be too long, so maybe 2 to 3 words.
Have you seen my Instagram photos?
Hashtag before sending. If you had to hashtag the description of how an incubator works, what would that hashtag be? Doesn't have to be an actual technical word, because I'll give you an example. For me, an incubator is like a mother nesting its child.
For me, I mean, this is also a very buzzy tech word, but for an incubator is something that's pre-ideation. You have a couple of different ideas and you're just sort of marinating in them. You're not fully committed to actually execute on those ideas, and you're not fully committed in order to be able to build a company build a business out of it. One of I think the drawbacks of an incubator, I mean, there are many positives as well, and I have many friends that run incubators, but I think that the time frames are so short that unless you come in fully focused, a lot of the time, if you look up at like Startup Chile or any of the incubators down in South America, it's a 4-month sprint, quote unquote, with people that have very early stage ideas and no team built into place to actually execute on those ideas.
I've never understood an incubator that was less than a year. I just think you spend most of the time in the early stage incubation, you spend about 3 to 5 months just even figure out how to monetize and run a business.
Exactly.
Most of the time you don't even know that base format. So I think that's a good way, and that's why I said a mother nesting its child, because that's what your mothers do for you when you're growing up. You want to do everything. So they allow you to pretty much do everything, and then once you gain focus, the mother helps you to guide and gain that focus. I mean, parenting in general.
But with those kinds of programs, incubators, accelerators, I think people in our industry sometimes use them interchangeably, but there's a very big difference between the two of them. But in general, when you look at structured programs like this, what they don't offer is they don't offer you a team. They don't, you're still if you're a first-time founder, you're still responsible to be finding your technical co-founder or CTO. You're still responsible to be vetting your developers. And when you need to scale, it's not going to be the guy running the accelerator incubator that's actually going to be calling up developers and interviewing them. It's on you. So if you don't happen to have that kind of background, it becomes very difficult to hire the right people. And I think that anyone that's an entrepreneur can say one of the biggest mistakes they've ever made, and myself included, is hiring the right person and firing them too slowly. Our timelines are so short when it comes to really figuring out if this is a product market fit when we launch a product, that if you don't have the right team in place, then you're not really giving your idea a chance to grow.
So how would you define at that point then, how would you define an accelerator?
I think to switch it up, I think the right company to go into an accelerator is one that has a very specific goal and a functioning product and company already. So Y Combinator, right? I would consider that a very successful model of an accelerator, but the people, if you look at the Y Combinator class, the ones that have been successful are the ones that already have a product market fit, have some sort of ideas of what their revenue models should be, have very clear personas of who their users are, and then they come in there to leverage either A, the Y Combinator network, or B, the mentorship from specific people. If you come in on the first day and don't have a game plan for what you want out of that experience, I think that the accelerator programs in general are very independent, and you need to be a self-starter to be able to take advantage of them.
I agree. How many of you guys in here are actually true entrepreneurs or running your own business? Okay. What phase, or I guess if me and you know this, but if we had to break it up in phases for funding, which I sometimes think this is an expressive way, who's at that seed round, who's at the angel round, and who thinks they're ready? Because even if you are ready, you most likely are at the VC round. So who's at that seed round, the friends and family round? Who's at that point? Okay.
Friends and family, me and me, but
Who's at the Who's at the angel round? Okay.
congrats.
Who is at the VC round? Honesty. I like that. And not that I don't think anybody that will be at the VC round can't find any information from this and take any benefit from it. But I think if you raised your hand for the seed round, you are most likely at the incubator level. Because you don't just need somebody to help you get it going. You need somebody to help you understand that you have a
Exactly.
passion for it, make sure this is actually what you want to do, make sure you even understand what you're doing. Because I'm sure, and this is, I use it as an example because I remember I spent about 2 days, you weren't even working here yet. This was about 4 years ago. I'm sorry, 2.5 years ago. I spent about 4 days at Rocker Labs, just kind of stopping in and out, just to overhear conversations. And you would be amazed at the level of incompleteness, that would be my politically correct word, incompleteness that people would come in with these concepts, and I would hear 2 things from Nabil that he would ask that always caught me, and it would be, how do you make money?
Yeah.
And people be like, and I'm thinking to myself, that's the first thing that I always think of when I come up with an idea, unless it's a hobby.
Yeah.
Because as a hobby, you're spending money for enjoyment. As a business, you're spending money to make money. And then the second question was how are you actually going to get it done?
Yep.
And then again, it would be a
Yeah.
room of silence. And I was like, so you have no plan of execution, and you have absolutely no idea of knowing how you're going to monetize this concept.
And I think that's actually a very common response within the general ecosystem. One of the reasons why I joined Rocker Labs and I'm so passionate about the way we co-build companies is I think it's no fault of the entrepreneur if they're doing it the first time. When I first built my company, I made every mistake in the book. You know, I had an outsourcing team in India that I would go to school during the day, stay up all night to be able to talk to them via Skype. And I wasted a lot of resources of my own time building a company the wrong way the first time around. So everyone, you know, when they first do it, they're making mistakes. One of the reasons why I think Rocker has been so successful so far on a global level is we're able to mitigate those risks for the entrepreneur. It starts off even from the ideation stage. You know, you wouldn't believe, and you can talk to Aurelia out here in the audience because she talks to entrepreneurs all day, how many ideas that are exactly the same that we hear day in, day out. And what that really tells me from my side of the table is your idea is probably not that unique. You know, what's going to really give you a level of success is how you execute on that idea.
Right.
And that comes down to like being with the correct partner, being with someone that actually knows how to build a company, has done it before, and can actually save you money and time along the way because they have a system and a methodology in place that can evaluate your idea, can tell you whether or not this idea can be executed, for how much, and what kind of people do you need to hire in order to build a successful company out of it.
I have a process, and I would be curious to know one of your processes. Adam has went through this with me. Alicia has went through this with me. And as great as an idea is, and I don't know if it's just inhabitants of having a company medium 4, and we started doing things in 4, and there's 4 seasons, there's 4 quarters to a game. It started working out, and I got to a point where I was like, if you can't explain to me this business model in 4 steps, or no, 4 processes,
Yeah.
there's either too much already or not enough. Because I would get to people, I'm like, I said 4 steps, and they would get to about the 12th step, and I still didn't understand what was going on. And I understood that process more so from investors, because I realized the more money someone has, the less time they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would realize, you know, and then I went through the Goldman Sachs program, and I really had to learn this even more because it became a 10-second intro, the 30-second intro, and 60 seconds, and then you get the 3 minutes. And I was like, oh, 3 minutes is forever. I would realize then in 3 minutes, you know, I have a lot to say, and I don't have that much time.
Yeah.
3 minutes quickly turned into 180 seconds. And I don't know if that makes sense to you guys or why I'm saying it that way. Because 3 minutes is how long you are in a ring to fight. That's how long you box. So when you're boxing for 3 minutes, you have to assume you have to be in great physical condition and you're going to get tired by the time you get into that second or third round. It's exerting. 180 seconds, you're paying attention to every millisecond of what's going on, and any additional sound is a second wasted when you're making this 3-minute pitch. Yep. And I started using that to say, here's your 4 steps. Every additional step, every additional method, you've lost a percentage of my interest of me wanting to have involvement with what you're doing. Now, it doesn't mean I shut them off. It just means by the time I've lost 50% of my interest, I now have to re-educate you and find somewhere to guide you because I'm not ready to work with you. So that's been my process. So I'm curious with your level of success and the things you do, how do you kind of screen people to see, are they even ready?
Yeah. So I think that becomes a combination of things. The overarching question that I always ask myself is, what problem are they trying to solve? Because if it's not, and are people ready to have a solution for that problem? And that's always been my personal mantra when it comes to either building a startup or evaluating whether or not I want to join a startup. For Rocker Labs, I think that one of the things we see with entrepreneurs is we want them to be subject matter experts. We want them to know the industry. We want them to be able to run a company and know what the pain points are in their specific industry, so they're more knowledgeable than us in order to be able to pivot and build the company up from scratch. The other thing that we really have seen, and this goes back to our methodology, is the concept of experimentation. Oftentimes, when you're sitting on an idea for years and years and years, you become so vested in it that you can't actually be open to pivoting it or being able to respond quickly to market opportunities. So when we build a company, we really structure it in the sense that we have this hypothesis. It's almost like an idea that we have of what we could do to solve this problem, but the entire co-building process is a series of small experiments that will validate our assumptions and be able to allow us to build a successful company, but also to respond to market conditions. So rather than spending 6 months, 10 months, 12 months pursuing a specific route, by having small, distinct experiments along the way that validate what our assumptions are, that really, whether it's a logo or whether it's a user acquisition strategy. I think that's the market moves so quickly and companies are launched and born and die so quickly these days that if you're not nimble on your feet, if you're not open to experimentation and pivoting, then you're just going to get, if you're going to wait until your product is perfect to launch, you're going to be dead by the time your competitors are already rising out of your ashes.
It doesn't matter. So what we're going to do is we're going to transition over to a part 2 of this. I want to make it more of an interactive Q&A. We're going to be joined by Professor Haas from General Provisions. So it's a classroom. You never know what to expect. So we're going to improvise real quick and bring this in. So we'll be right back. So we're going to get involved right now. You heard our first part of our interview, and we're going to get in where you're fitting. So we thought, you know what, let's switch it up a little bit. We want to get some crowd interactivity and make sure they have the opportunity to see where they stand within the format and the visibility of how their companies are growing. And co-workspaces are very hot right now in South Florida, but I'm more attentive to the co-build and the people that actually are involved in the operations of the company. So I want to have a little bit of discussion, so I want to bring some more additional people back to our panel. So if you guys don't mind, let's give a brief introduction of who you are and which organization you work with.
Sure. My name is Timothy Hassedy, and I'm the founder of General Provision in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I'm also the principal of a startup studio called Trim Agency. And we're actually headquartered within that same facility, the co-working space in Fat Village, Fort Lauderdale.
We're going to have a little bit of fun with the crowd and get some interaction out of them. So the first person I'm going to call on is going to be Adam. Adam, you raised your hand for the, are you in a seed phase? I think you were right between a seed and an angel phase. So why don't you briefly tell us about the concept you're working on and why you feel you need to raise that money and where would you fit best? Or why don't you just tell us about the concept first and we'll go from there.
Okay, so the concept is basically, we could take this room for example. Say I come here and I see a piece that I really like. Well, I can't get a lot of information and I can't talk to the artist at the moment. So I'm able to scan this piece of art and then I get returned information and maybe a curation from the artist. From there, I could possibly purchase this print or items that have this print on it. and then share this, and just some other things that we're still working on. But the reason that we would want funding is to be able to go and catalog these pieces of art in various areas, starting with here in Miami, and then continuing to build our platform.
I don't know how you came up with that, but that sounds like an amazing idea.
Beautiful idea.
It's totally stunning. But, so Tim, you hear that concept. If you had to, and I want to show you these, putting these guys on the spot, because this isn't pre-scripted. You work with an agency, so you hear a concept like that. First thought is, what's the name you would put to it if you had to put a name to it, would be the first thing. Second thing is, were you able to dictate the business model? Third thing is, what would you advise to happen next?
So in regards to, if I were to put a name on it, you're asking as far as where I would categorize this in a certain vertical or some sort of platform, yeah. From what I'm understanding, I think this is what could be more of a marketplace play if you wanted to go that route, but certainly experience itself lent itself to doing a whole lot of good for people in the specific niche, of course. First question I would have in hearing that concept is, where does the product stand now? Because you said you're working on it and there are certain features that you guys are developing on the platform still. So I'd like to know what that means today. Is the product live? What stage is the actual build out?
So the product's not live, but it will be in beta probably starting next week.
And you have tested this in some controlled environment at some point?
We've done a little bit of testing, but we still want to do more testing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, it's all about seeing proof of concept, right? So when we have these conversations, people walk in our door every day, and we want to know where they're at in the concept. There's no market for ideas, right? That's something that we learn in this space pretty quickly. Ideas are not sold every single day. It's what happens after that idea. And so where the concept is, and then who is behind the team, those are all like important first steps in understanding where we go with it. But I mean, that's definitely something it's probably meeting a big need. And like I said, I don't know if there's, Mike asked me if I know the business model right away. I think I would have to dive into it a little bit more. But like I said, from what I'm hearing initially, it could be a marketplace play. But it sounds like maybe your goal is to solve the problem of discovery, right? That's really what you have to do first, right?
It's definitely a good way to put it, yes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, reason why I say this is unscripted, Adam is actually my business partner in a platform called Curator. And this is how, and remember when we was talking about protecting your ideas, what do you share, what do you not share, how do you find out where you're at? By Tim's response, I would know whether or not he even has an interest for me to work with him. So before I would ask of anything from him, I'm getting his point of view first. So the fact that he was able to categorize it, marketplace, discovery, and one of our key lines is, Curator will be to art what Shazam is to music. And Shazam is nothing but music discovery. That's the basis of Shazam. So we want it to be that to art. Now, for the sales part, for the marketplace for music, and Troy Carter has joined us today. Troy Wright. I was about to make you worth about $2 billion real quick there.
That's okay.
Talking into existence. Troy Wright, who is very involved in music, would understand this, and Tim, I know you would too. The marketplace comes into place because our next statement is, we want it to be to art what iTunes was to music. And the sales of digital music was greatly impacted because of iTunes. So now that I would have an understanding that he has an understanding of me, not just that I understand what he does, he has an understanding of me. That is the first of what you guys heard earlier about that relationship. So now my conversation with him is a lot easier, Because now that I've said, and I can see it in Tim's face, now I got to go have a conversation with him because he's right here in Flagler Village, which is an art district. He's embedded into an art field. So he not only sees this every day, he interacts with it. It's right around him. It takes over his building second Saturdays. So last Saturday, yeah. So, and we're over in that CRA. So that's the way you have to look at these things. The titles, and I think it's actually kind of led to this, the titles don't mean as much as just knowing how that company operates, because the words have become so interchangeable. Some people run accelerators and call them incubators, but they last for 8 weeks. To me, if it's 8 to 13 weeks, that's an accelerator, because there's no way you're incubating me. I mean, can a child be born in 8 weeks? And that's how I think. You're nursing your baby. So it's the minimum of 9 months to at least, have the child, just to make the child. Then you actually have to push the baby out, which is making that product go live. And then you got to go through the hurdles of raising that child to at least where it can be self-sustaining and take care of itself.
And to see how many children are even present by the poor mother. I mean, your mom has like 50 kids running around. She will not be feeding you anytime soon, right? So you join the Accelerator, Incubator, whatever they want to call it, program, and your class is 50 companies. You have to look to see who's actually running it, who's on the ground day to day, and what their mentorship network really is. How active are the mentors? Like, talk to previous classes and see what their feedback is. Because if they say that they showed up, got a desk, and then never heard from anyone again until demo day, I think that speaks highly to what kind of family you're being brought up in.
But that analogy, I mean, that was great.
I'm just saying.
I mean, there's one of those profound, that's one of those t-shirts, because that's very true for an accelerator, because if the accelerator doesn't have a network, like, I've seen Tim's connection. I know he's tied into the community. That matters to me. So I would trust him with an idea because of the integrity of him as a person. But I have seen accelerators where you show up, all they want to do is make sure, I was almost about to say their name, make sure you want to hit certain benchmarks to make sure they get their funding. And you got to remember, some accelerators are getting paid just to give you money. They really don't care if you make it. Because even though they're cutting you a $25,000 check and it feels good, I always tell people it's just like playing NFL, playing any sports. If they can pay you $10 million, imagine how much they're making. So if somebody can give away $25,000 to 10 companies, imagine how much they're sitting on just to do it. And then if they're doing nothing to actually make you a better company, what did you really get out of it besides $25,000? And it's not sometimes worth it. Tim, you have an expertise in marketing, and if you guys ever want to see one of the dopest websites ever, Trim Agency is just amazing. Housing a coffee shop right now, right? And you're moving to a bigger space, right?
Our office itself?
Yeah.
So our co-working space is our home. So General Provision is the name of the space that we reside in. It's our baby. It's our passion project. We manage it as part of a brand, one of our brands in our portfolio. But there are other companies within it too. So it is a fully functioning co-working space. There are other entrepreneurs, other startups. There are other forms of life in this space. And I think that when we kind of look at the difference between these accelerators and incubators and co-working spaces, and in some cases the lines are blurred, but I think when it comes to co-working versus accelerator or incubator, they're definitely after different goals. General Provision is a little bit unique because we have an inherent direction with a software company that's built in it, that's out to co-build companies. But overall, co-working spaces are there to fill a physical need first, and then bring in ancillary value, and I wouldn't even call it ancillary value, bring in other value by the collaboration and the network of other members that are at that same space with you. So that's what General Provision started off to do, and it's basically just a call to the community. Fort Lauderdale is not Miami. It's still very, very much different in the landscape and the environment and the types of businesses that are starting there. And naturally, the larger conversation, South Florida becomes Miami, and then like little pockets like Fort Lauderdale kind of get left behind in the talking points. So we wanted a home in Fort Lauderdale. That was really the whole purpose of building General Provision. We wanted to put a stake in the ground and say that Fort Lauderdale has a home for startup conversations, and it looked like a co-working space at first, and that's what the business model is. But we've been open for a year and a half now, and really what we're trying to do is really dive deeper into that tech conversation, really dive deeper into that startup conversation. Now we're home of Windcode Fort Lauderdale. We're home to the Founder Institute, so now we have those elements of both pipeline of talent as well as the accelerator mindset. And so that's kind of the environment overall. I mean, you didn't ask that directly, but Trim is in the middle of that, so it's completely intertwined.
And that's even better. So who here is actually in an accelerator, incubator, or a co-work space right now? All you guys run businesses. None of you are in a. So is there a reason why anybody here has never been a part of an accelerator or incubator? Anybody want to comment on that?
Is this thing on?
Yeah.
I just started my business in July, and I did not want to get stuck in planning mode. So I just jumped up out the airplane with the parachute, started advertising, marketing, hosting, coordinating classes, and listening to my PayPal go, you have money, and started working it. And so I'm building it as I go. I realized that I do need a space to host trainings. So I've been looking and visiting at locations and trying to come to events like this to figure out how to build it, how to stay on the right path before I end up way out yonder.
So to our professors, she has a product or service. I know it's a service actually, but it's wrapped up as a product too. She's already making money, but she could kind of be in limbo. I have my opinion on what the answer should be, but if you had to advise her out of the three, which direction should she go at this point?
Well, there's the fourth option, Rocker Labs. I think that at the end of the day, I'm assuming you're a first-time entrepreneur, or at least a first time in this specific industry that are trying to solve a problem. All of these accelerators, incubators, co-working spaces, a lot of it is about just having a place to park your laptop. What you really need, when you said, I want to make sure that I align myself so I'm not going off to left field without realizing 6 months in, what you really need is a partner of some sort that actually has done this before and can guide you along the way to help you and enable you and empower you to make the right decisions. So for us, from Rocker Labs' perspective, yes, we have physical spaces where our entrepreneurs can come and work with their companies, but it's so much more than that. It's being able to give them a platform and the resources to actually scale and give them the right tools to be able to do that without them having to learn from their mistakes. We've learned, all of us, at Rocker Labs have been entrepreneurs previously.
Right.
So when someone comes and joins us, we want to make sure we impart that knowledge so they can accelerate quickly without having to stop for any detours along the way.
Who's considered accelerator, or incubator, or co-work space, and you were actually just afraid to make that next step? Alyssa?
So just like you mentioned, part of the reason why I stayed away from a co-working space was because it just seemed like a place to park my laptop. I have internet in my house. I can park myself on my sofa and work. If I want to meet other people, I can go sit down and meet with other people. So it would be different if I were in a situation, or I found a situation where, it's not just an office space or not just a desk, but there's opportunity there. When you come in, part of your membership is education every month or introductions once a month. Now that I'll pay for, but for a chair, I have really nice chairs at home.
That's a good approach, and I think you guys have kind of touched on that because you're starting to bring in more speakers and more education. I know Rocker Labs, you guys do speaking engagements, and so, and I guess maybe this is a direct question to you all, and you can just answer, question, raise your hand. We'll get right back to you. Would you guys be more willing to pay for co-work space or incubation if you knew that you were going to get maybe sessions like this once a month, or that we were going to bring in investors that could review your ideas? They might not invest in you, but just to give you an opinion. If you knew it was going to be more interactivity and a built-in programming for the co-work space, would you pay for a membership of that space at that point? Yes? Second question. would it have to be located in the heart of Fort Lauderdale, downtown, Brickell? Like, how much does location matter to you?
It would be better if it was in a warehouse area, to be a warehouse.
Warehouse district,
Yeah, I don't.
Some of it's
the
bargaining,
traffic now.
honestly.
parking,
South Beach.
Fort
Fort
Lauderdale?
Lauderdale.
So, because of traffic and because of locational purposes.
But I would also say, at the end of the day, if you're building a startup, yes, parking matters just from the sheer convenience of it. The flip side of location, I would say your end goal is to ultimately get funded and to scale your company. So when you're looking at location, what you should be looking for is where is it easiest for investors to come and see you, and where would your potential partners or clients be. So you know, a warehouse might be very convenient for you and your team to work out of, but it could also mean that no investor wants to trek out there because they're all based in one street or one area of the city. So in my mind, I think those are the more important location questions to consider.
And I agree. And it's probably the first time I've disagreed with somebody on the panel. I know that statement to be true. I feel we do have to get to a position to start forcing the hand. You have them, in a sense, almost investors need inventors right now more than we need them. Because there's so many different ways to raise money. And I think if we build facilities, I think that's the nuance of how South Florida has gotten trapped. And that's why hardly anybody knew about Magic Leap, just because it's in Dania. So you can't get people in Dade County to even cross the county line. So you try to tell somebody have a meeting with me in Fort Lauderdale, it's, oh, I gotta come for what? Where's that at?
Yeah.
That road, it's a road that's called Broward, Sunrise, and Oakland. Can you meet me there? And it's like, I don't know, but you ask there in Miami and you say, well, can you meet me? If you say no to coming to Miami, they're like, what do you mean you can't make it out here? What do you mean you don't want to deal with traffic? So, and you even take that into the craft brewer industry. Funky Buddha is one of the greatest places people don't experience because they don't know about Oakland Park. They don't want to go there. So I think we're kind of in a position as entrepreneurs, let's give them this greatness and house it somewhere else, like, you know, General Provisions, and promote it. But it comes to a point like, you guys really are making that standpoint.
Well,
are you going to drive out there and make them come to you?
It becomes about creating an ecosystem, right?
Yes.
I think to a certain extent, I do agree with you. If you look at what was done with Zappos in Las Vegas, right?
Yes.
One company, probably, if you're very focused on like customer acquisition and it's a very physical interaction, you probably shouldn't be by yourself in a warehouse. But at the same time, leaders in the community, like what we did with Wynwood, with Midtown, et cetera, if we create an ecosystem that supports people to get affordable housing, to be able to move there, that has coffee shops or meeting places for them to meet and have meetings, that has office space for them to create their companies, yes, and absolutely, then that can become an entire ecosystem that's self-sustainable into itself. And there are very successful examples, like in Philadelphia and Las Vegas, et cetera, where that's been done. I think for Miami, we have done that to a certain extent, where we've created pockets where there haven't been, where technology is, I guess, encouraged.
Our
Where
pockets are still pretty much in a 7-mile radius right now, though.
I mean, but that's just time, right?
Yeah.
We've, if you look back, I was just talking to someone in the audience before the panel began. Look to where Miami was when it comes to tech and startups 4 years ago.
Nowhere.
It was the same thing in New York when I first started there. It was 2007, 2006,
Right.
and you look to where New York is today with its ecosystem. I think that the more success stories we have, the more people move down here and start their own companies, the more funding we'll have. Then everyone becomes better educated about what's needed in the ecosystem, and we can diversify along the way. And
Absolutely.
maybe Fort Lauderdale will become
Maybe,
the hub.
Maybe. Tim, you had a...
Well, I was mentioned that it's also, I think we're talking about two different things. I think that obviously our job in part as the manager of a space whose job is to create the ecosystem. We started to talk about community events and the value beyond just a butt and a seat, right? We have a table, we have a chair, yes, but that's not what you're paying for, right? You're paying for all these speakers, you're paying for all these community events, you're paying for all these meetups and things that bring value to what is now becoming a very niche ecosystem. And I think when we're talking about the space conversation, I think it is obviously a win if that space is not only the place that you're creating your company, but it's also the talking point of investors. But I think that in most cases, those are different business operations, right? So like where I go to build my company isn't necessarily the platform where the investors are going to come see it. Now that's a massive value if that becomes that place, which is what we hope to do. But at the end of the day, we're a gym for entrepreneurs and startups, right? So that's really the most important is to build that entrepreneurial spirit and that
I like
startup
that term. A gym for entrepreneurs. That's you better tag that before I get home.
And by the
tonight.
way, we are a warehouse downtown in the art district in the most accessible city, or in the most accessible part of the town. So
Yes,
that's
very
kind of
much.
a unique thing.
We have one more question from Extras and then
I
Christopher.
guess my question was in response to the lady in the back. In creating my company, I want to create a core. I want my brand. I do trainings and consulting. I don't want to meet at Starbucks. When I'm doing classes, I can go all over the community, but I would like to have a set core class or core classes that I have in my own space, where once a week for 6 weeks or whatever it is.
So you definitely need a co-work space because you can rent the facilities and they have
Right.
meeting rooms and everything.
And along with all that I'm able to provide in my resources, it just makes sense that I have classroom meeting space so that when I convert, I reheard that word this morning, when I convert a contact into a customer, we're not searching for a place. And because I work with nonprofits who start at home and entrepreneurs who start at home, I don't want to go into your house, although that's your home base. I'd rather have you come into
Your space.
a more safe, secure structure. So it's not that I don't need it. It just happened. So the first time I did a whole bunch of planning and didn't get anything done. So I said, this time we're going to start working.
All right.
And as we come in, we're going to set some money aside to pay rent and get everything up and going. So this is a learning process for me to see where am I going to go and how am I going to grow and who I'm going to partner with all of that what I have to offer.
That makes sense. Chris, you had a question? Oh, okay.
I think sometimes too that part of the issue is that people don't fully understand what all it entails. And I think sometimes we hide behind it on the surface area of what we think it is. So I think the appropriate question would be really, do people understand what the two are and the differences between the two? Because with not engaging in it, it's because you just don't know. You don't know it's an additional resource that may be made available to you.
I think we've all seen that a fear of entry point is a lack of knowledge, so you don't want to. I've said this and it's very harsh. People avoid things because they don't want to sound stupid, but it's like you're actually more stupid by not asking a question. So, but that's why I actually wanted to address this, because I know so many people that have shied away. They're like, oh, well, we really don't know what an accelerator is. Just ask. There's nothing wrong with asking somebody, what is an accelerator and what does your accelerator do? And so the basis of it is normally a program, but I've also had to find myself saying, let me simplify the response to let them know I was in the same position 2 years ago. I didn't know the difference between an accelerator and incubator. I just know I needed help. That's what I knew.
And I think that's the best way to position it, is a way to help.
Right. And one more question
And
here.
actually, going off of that, I think that when you're asking those questions, the best people to talk to often isn't like the website or the program directors. Talk to the people that have gone through the program, because they probably, in theory, they are probably at the same stage, if a little bit, a couple of months out from where you are currently, and they have real, very relevant experience to what it was like to be in that program.
Well, I'm not sure if what I'm about to say is correct, but I think I know a lot of people that do want to join. I think you have people with great dreams and great visions and might be prepared, but they live paycheck to paycheck, so it's very difficult to join. And you have a group of people that really can afford it, can ultimately
The risk, yeah.
just afford to do it, and they probably have a development. And I heard what you were saying, what you said to him when he was saying it was in beta. It's very difficult. It's like saying if someone has a Uber idea, if they were the first Uber, where it takes $1 million to even show you something, and how am I going to show you something? Let's say even if it took $100,000, how am I going to come in and show you something because ideas are not sold? What if I was able to do a video to show you how it works, but to actually create the software? How does the person show you a $100,000 program?
Do you guys remember which professor said the easiest way to pitch an idea was what he said? A note, 4 sheets of paper. I think your question, and I was in the same position, was something I had to learn. It was a very hard lesson, and next person y'all definitely want to hear speak, Professor Garzier, which is one of my mentors. I got to a point understanding having my conversations with him. If you can't explain it and they see the vision, they probably won't see it if you put $20,000 or $50,000 into designing it or building it. So the biggest thing I've seen with a lot of startup companies is, and I don't care whether it's an incubator, accelerator, co-work space, anything in life, the one thing that I've spent the last 6 months on perfect the pitch deck. If you can't pitch that concept and get someone to respond, it doesn't matter if you built it or not. That pitch deck could be typed up and put together in Microsoft Word. It doesn't even have to be graphically great, doesn't have to have that much to it, but a lot of times Uber didn't have to have, and since you use Uber as an example, does anybody know the initial thing that Uber used to offer? From what you see today, do you remember the initial thing? Yes. Who said the luxury car?
Grocery delivery?
No. Uber started off as a black car service. To become a Uber driver, you had to have a black luxury vehicle, period. And the inspections were 10 times harder than they are now. So you had to have Fiji bottled water. You had to have a certain kind of music on at a certain level. You had to have a luxury vehicle, and it had to be black. Uber is not what you guys see. It started off very niche, and then people realized, I can't pay this amount of money, but I want the car service. I still want to get around because I'm still getting drunk and I still want to get home safely. So they expanded it. Then it became Uber. Uber still had a certain level. You had to have a certain kind of car at that point. Now think about these as phases of accelerator, incubators, and everything else we just talked about. Think about these the same way. So then it was like, okay, now you got to have the Maxima, an Infinity, etc. More people want to drive that need to make money, but they can't afford these cars. Then there became Uber X. Now you have somebody picking you up in a Civic, a Prius, and everything else. So it grew. But they had to be able to, I'm pretty sure it wasn't the software that they sold. They sold the ability to be able to undercut the taxi companies.
I agree with you when you say a proof of concept, right?
Well,
If people will pay for the service.
I think that it's not necessarily about having like a full-blown beta or like a well-executed prototype. What you really need to think about is at this early stage, every single company we're talking about is a huge risk for both the investor and for the entrepreneur. Investors aren't that much smarter than an entrepreneur. It's all, there are certain ways to mitigate risk, which is what we do at Rocker, to be able to make smart decisions when it comes to our investments. But for the most part, I was offered Airbnb when they were in their, just entering their Series A. And what my response was, I was like, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Why would I ever want to sleep in someone else's dirty bed? Literally, that was my response. So this just shows that, and I, to this day, very much regret it, right? But investors aren't that much smarter than entrepreneurs, but they've learned through certain behaviors and through their own experiences to vet certain things. And those are, what's the team like? What kind of experience? Do I really believe when you look me in the eye and tell me about your idea that you're a passionate, dedicated to it, and you have the skill set, or you're a hustler enough to gather people around you that have a skill set that can execute on what you're telling me?
You had to believe, were they a hustler enough to make people sleep in a dirty bed?
Yeah, exactly.
Had to say.
No, and then the second thing is, what I would say is,
I'm sorry, I wanted to know if within your space, I guess it's not about you just being an entrepreneur, but are there people are there hackers, are there lawyers, are there like a different, can you find your team there, or do you have to go somewhere else? Yes.
In a co-working environment, you're going to get that diversity. In other more closed door environments, like an accelerator or an incubator, part of what you're doing is they're facilitating that fitment process. But if you're looking to do it by yourself and just attract or be around certain areas of talent, of the three discussion points, a co-working space is probably better suited for just finding somebody cold. what you're basically paying for at an incubator level, or paying in the form of your company stake, is for a management team to be dropped in at the incubator level. And then at an accelerator level, they might also help find, through their mentoring, other people that can augment your team. But if this is a starting point thing, it's really about, and even in the conversation of co-working spaces, they tend to start niching out, right? So you need to, if there's ever an interest, you want to explore these spaces, because one might skew fintech, one might skew creative tech, or there are different niches that start to develop through any kind of community.
Yeah. And the way to think about in terms of what Rocker does, and this goes back to the cost issue, we're very realistic. It's very expensive to build a company, right? If it was cheap, everyone would be building a company, and there wouldn't be that level of dedication towards executing on that idea. One of the ways that we suggest for our entrepreneurs and the way we partner with them is to think of a series of experiments that will validate certain parts of your idea or certain parts of your company. And those can be very short experiments that you can see if there's a product market fit, if maybe the name works. So when, instead of spending months and hundreds of thousands of dollars and building out a company, and then it flops and you're not really sure, is it because of the logo, is it because of the name, is it because you had the wrong user acquisition? If you do these short experiments that are a little bit less expensive than a full-blown prototype, you're able to gather pieces of evidence so that when you sit across the table from an investor, they're able to believe in you and what you say you'll do, because you've already done certain parts of it along the way.
And I think that's going to be a perfect segue into our next and final discussion of the day, which is show me the money. How do you get investors and everybody interested in you? So what we'll do is we want to thank our professors for coming out. We appreciate you guys. Let's give them a round of applause.